Welcome to Transforming Medical Communications, a podcast by MedComms Experts. We share medical communications insights and advice from the best and brightest in the industry to find out what they're doing to push our industry forward. Here's your host, Wesley Portegies.
Welcome to the Transforming Medical Communications podcast. I'm your host, Wesley Portegies, and with me today is Matthew Krzywosz. He is the Director of Scientific Communications and Content at Astellas. He has worked his way up through the ranks from a pharmaceutical intern role at Walgreens, but now works in medical affairs and medical communications. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Thank you, Wesley. It is a pleasure to be here. I've heard so much about this show. I've seen it on Spotify and across several other platforms. So it's really a privilege to be here. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure to have you here. Thank you. So maybe to open our episode today, maybe you can talk us a little bit through your career. Of course, it's impressive starting as this pharmaceutical intern at Walgreens and knowing where you are now, and it's quite a difference. So maybe you could tell us a little bit more, what you have all been through and experienced through that time. And of course, also, why are you ending up in MedComms? What is it that drives you to be active in MedComms?
What a great question. So to kick us off, so for me, after I finished my pharmacy degree at Butler University, go Dogs, I feel that I've taken quite the non-traditional career path as a pharmacist to wind up here in the MedCom space. So after getting my degree, instead of going into retail pharmacy or getting a residency role with a hospital or even getting a fellowship position within the pharmaceutical industry, I decided to pack my bags and head to New York City to actually work for a startup health tech company in the clinical trial patient recruitment space. So I took full advantage of working for the startup company by working in clinical content management, to business development and partnerships, to even adding in some marketing experience as well. So after some time there, I then went into management consulting for medical affairs organizations. And then from there, I eventually made my way into big pharma, having now worked in 2 global medical affairs roles where I've been charged with leading the scientific content and communications. So that's kind of my journey in a nutshell. And to your second point about, what's driving me today, what's motivating me, I would say my passion for medical communications, albeit in a little bit of a different sense, really stems from my early days as a pharmacy intern, where I was really tasked with distilling key points about medications and treatment plans to patients in a very, easy, simplified way. So by really interacting with my patients, understanding their pain points, seeing where I could really make their lives better, this has constantly been my North Star in terms of my inspiration over the years. And that has continued to be that way today. Even though today I'm a little bit more removed from direct patient care, what still continues to keep my engine revving is knowing that any communication or any piece of medical material that I create that educates a healthcare professional, this is ultimately getting to our patients, and that is continuously in the back of my mind and gets me up each and every day.
That's beautiful, and it sounds like music to my ears as well, and I relate to that. We both work on in a different setting, but I've always been very proud of my agency, providing information, and I think the commonality that I see here is that we both believe that people make decisions based on the information they have, and if they don't have the information, they cannot make the right decisions, and we help them make sure they have it, right? So Absolutely. That is definitely beautiful and admirable. I guess you opened the door to kind of immediately dive deep here then. And I would like to start talking a little bit more about what has changed when it comes to how healthcare professionals consume information and consume content. So over those years, what have you seen that had really changed, and what do you feel are the hot topics right now in MedComms that we need to address?
Yeah. So this is a loaded question, and there's so many great answers to this. For me, I think, over the past several years, there's just been a boom in data, boom in publications, so much at our fingertips as a healthcare profession. And it's quite the task to kind of stay up on top of all of that, especially our HCPs who are seeing more and more patients each day. And then even in addition to that, with all this information at our fingertips, I'd also say our attention spans have also dramatically kind of decreased. So we really need to make sure we're getting the right message across right away to keep and maintain that focus of anybody that we're speaking to. So, this is why in my time here working in the MedCom space, I've seen recently the need and the growing appetite for more kind of bite-sized content, more modular content that our HCPs can digest. And from there, we could also dive deeper into the data, deeper into more specific points that might be raised. But I think it's really important for us to start small, whether it's maybe a short animation or a video or an infographic that somebody from our field medical teams can talk through using the art of scientific storytelling, which is a science in and of itself. But from there, by having just some high level overview, then we could get into the weeds if we need to, because I also see, I think prior, 10, 15 years ago, I think we all just had all of this content that also with very little white space, potentially in slides or in anything that we would show HCPs, and it would just be overwhelming, way too overwhelming. We would lose their focus. We wouldn't be educating them to the highest extent that we know we could. And so, yeah, we got to start small and eventually build up so that they come away with a few key points, because we're not going to get every point across to them. But as long as we hit the few key takeaways whenever we're interacting with our HCPs, we're going to make that difference for our patients ultimately.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, Matt, I have a question about that. I guess communicating in this more concise way and creating deliverables that are more concise is kind of new to us as an industry, right? If you look at the traditional way of scientific communications, we're exhaustive and inclusive of anything we can get our hands on, basically. Look at the average scientific poster and everyone knows what I mean, right? So what can we do to kind of change our mindset on that? And more practically, how do we decide what to communicate? How can we stay true to the scientific rigor, but at the same time create more concise information?
That is, I feel, the $1 million question right now here facing many medical affairs organizations. We want to go simpler. We want it to be engaging, yet we don't want to lose that scientific essence of our message. So with the fear of it maybe being more commercial in nature. So really to ensure that scientific accuracy, while also having our content and our message be simple, it really goes back to understanding our audience. Each of our HCPs, we could think of different segments of our customers and think about which way they like to digest information. That is very critical, very important before we ever can consider putting out any sort of information to them. We really got to understand them first, know what they like, and maybe, some of our HCPs, and we still see this today, they want the intense scientific data thrown at them. They want slides that have all of the Kaplan-Meier curves. They have all the patient characteristics. They want to see all the data. And for some, that's great. But I also know, like I said earlier, in this day and age where time is short. We got to really get a few key points across. We got to make sure that, we are testing our messaging and our key points with the field. We got to get feedback from our HCPs following interactions. Got to make sure that we're hitting the key points, because at the end of the day, we don't want to go too simple, but we also want to make sure that science and that scientific narrative is getting across to them. So, got to really first know our audience, and I feel like a lot of medical affairs teams are doing this now. We're surveying our HCPs. We're having these one-on-one conversations. I think those are really important. I've had several of these conversations at so many medical congresses, and these kind of hallway conversations, water cooler conversations, those have really led to us developing a lot of medical strategies and changes in the way that we do things, so that we're, at the end of the day, benefiting our HCPs and then ultimately our patients. So
thank you. There's a lot to unpack here. I hear a lot of interesting things. So, and tell me if I'm representing this like how you meant it, but what I hear you say is, if you want to communicate more concisely, you need to better understand what your audience is actually looking for, so you can basically answer a more specific and concrete question.
Yes, absolutely.
And then when you do so, you need to kind of test whether, when you are answering that question, if it's actually, like in a conversation, you might ask someone in like a business meeting, like, hey, did this answer your question? And kind of hear the answer and make sure it was, transmitted and understood correctly. So tell me a bit more about that. Like, how could people go about that? Like, if they want to build this understanding of their audience and the question to be answered better, how could they go about it?
Yeah, so I think this is something that, as a medical affairs community, we are still grappling with. I think we are all very proud individuals. We're very, very intelligent, and sometimes we don't like hearing when maybe our message or our educational points aren't really hitting home. But I think it's really imperative that we kind of accept that we're not perfect and we want to always get better. So I feel like something that we should be doing more of from a medical perspective, and I think this is done quite a bit from the commercial side of things, but following any interaction, we should be able to have a way, maybe it's a short email or maybe a quick message to our HCPs to really gauge the level of impact essentially from that interaction. Do they, like, what is like one or two key takeaways that they took from that interaction? Do they feel like they understand this topic better? I feel like it should be an easy, survey or something that we could do more of, because it's really hard to gauge medical impact these days. I think metrics and just medical metrics in and of itself, I think everybody has kind of a love and hate relationship with that, because each company is different, and it's just very hard right now to gauge, success. But I do feel like, some minor things, such as having some sort of way to survey or ask an HCP their level of understanding following interactions, that could be done, and we could then show and prove our value as a medical affairs organization just by doing that.
Yeah, I really like that. And I like the way of thinking. And you're right. Like with metrics currently, when it comes to medical communications, a lot of it is using quantitative metrics as a proxy for qualitative metrics. And it doesn't allow for much more like strategic input to understand what potentially would need to change about your content or how you could further optimize it. But I do think with the increase of digital channels, and even when this comes to field medical, where obviously the MSL isn't digital, but they work through digital tools right now and bringing maybe a tablet, there's so much opportunity to integrate a feedback loop. And I've also been thinking about other industries where they're doing that. Even as simple as a help page from some kind of product or company, where if you read, you're trying to solve something, you read their suggested solution, and at the bottom they ask like, did this help you? And if you say no, it's going to ask you like, why not? What happened? And I'm sure they're using that feedback to optimize their content, right? And we should be able to do the same in MedComms.
Yeah, and then that also comes with it the fear of being too commercial in nature. I feel like we're always trying to shy away from that. And actually, yeah, we absolutely must. But there has to be some middle ground, because I know medical affairs organizations provide immense value to companies, and it just isn't quantified as much as we all wish it was. So yeah, there has to be something here. And I'm sure, hopefully, with AI taking off, and that's a whole other conversation to be had, I'm hopeful that we could really show our true value here really soon.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Well, talking about digital communications, I was wondering if you have any experiences that you could share with us around like applying maybe some new and innovative formats, and whether you have seen any successes or results doing that.
Absolutely. So one impactful example from my experience in simplifying digital communications within my teams recently occurred when we started adding high-level overviews and clear takeaways of publications and Congress abstracts or presentations to our reactive scientific exchange materials. So initially, our content has always contained rich scientific content with almost no white space in our content, I might add. So text heavy, no white space. And I don't think it took a rocket scientist to know that, our HCPs were finding this kind of hard to navigate, hard to understand, and take some clear-cut messages away from this. So we've also gotten feedback from HCPs that, hey, we need simpler information, but if we want to go deeper, we can with our MSLs. So what we recently started doing is adding in interactive, high-level overviews or single slide summaries for a lot of our Congress presentations, as well as our key manuscripts. And by adding in these high-level overviews, adding in interactive features that would take our HCPs to certain, graphs or figures, or to other data that might be very specific, that might not be as necessary in a high-level overview, they're able to do so. So by having this ready to go for our field teams, it allowed them to also really flex their scientific storytelling, because not all the information is going to be shown on this high-level slide. They got to really do their research. They got to have a strong understanding of this data. And by doing that, they can really have a back and forth conversation with our HCPs, because that's what I think our HCPs want. And maybe they're not getting that as much. I think they're getting more of it now. We don't want our field teams to be just reciting content from slides. We want to have that face-to-face interaction as it really should be. We want to lead with questions. We want to just provide just enough to spark this dialogue, and we'd be amazed at where the conversation could go based off of what our HCP wants to know. So by starting small here, by providing these high-level overviews to our content, we've been able to now have overwhelmingly great feedback from our field teams and even leadership that, hey, we need this. We want to see more of this. Let's keep this going as a best practice.
Yeah, I really love that. And I like how you said, like, we want simple, but be able to deep dive if we need more. And I think that is what we often didn't do in like the more traditional way, right? We present everything right away, and there is not much distinction between what is actually needed in the moment. And in our minds, it sounds like it's sometimes a bit like as if it's an on-off switch. You either communicate everything or you communicate short form. While there's
Yeah, and I
actually
think
methodologies to do both, right?
right, and that's the medical affairs of old, where we're scientists at heart. We want to know all the answers. We need to know everything. Which knowing everything is great, but in this age where there's just so much information, we can't handle it all. We got to be able to take these key takeaways and articulate them to our audience. The time isn't there anymore to be able to go through everything in detail. Granted, though, you got to know your audience too, because maybe some HCPs have extra time and they want to know every nitty gritty detail. But for most of them now, they just can't. So I think also this is something that we've learned from our commercial colleagues, because they're also making sure they have even less time than we do. So they're leading with a lot of the high level information up front, and then they're going their way. But for us as medical, I also don't like how we always say, oh, we're a little bit behind commercial in this and in that. I'm really looking forward to the day, and I could talk about this forever, about how we could flip that switch. We want medical to be the pioneers. Commercial can learn a couple of things from us. And I think we're getting there. We're getting there. And I can't wait for that day where they'll be calling our names a lot more.
So yeah, I think that's a beautiful thing to say, and I fully agree that as a medical affairs function, we have so much value to offer, and I think it's becoming clearer and clearer, and we're getting better and better at the parts where we can further increase that value. When it comes to what you just said, I couldn't help but thinking it's kind of a less is more concept, right? So you say okay, we reduce the amount of content that the MSL would actually initially introduce into the conversation. And I can't help but think that in the past, the long PowerPoints that would be brought into those conversations, and especially the linear ones with 100 plus slides, have been maybe serving a little bit as a crutch for them too, right? You're in a conversation, you need to, and sometimes even you get the mandate to cover at least a certain part of those slides, rather than actually just have a conversation. And I think by reducing the amount of content, you just opened the door for a more natural conversation to happen. And that is exactly where value is created in my mind.
Absolutely. It doesn't even just add value. It also increases that relationship that you have with that HCP. It increases the trust there. And by doing that, I think you're going to have a more fruitful relationship moving forward, because you're leading with them in mind. You're not leading with your own agenda. You're not leading with, oh gosh, I got to get through these 10, 15 slides, because if I don't do that, then they're not going to understand X, Y, and Z. That's not the way to go about things anymore. You really got to lead with your HCP or your customers' needs first. And by starting small, starting simple, you can then get into the weeds.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's funny, you've probably seen the McKinsey report, right? The Medical Affairs 2030. And one of the big items there on MedComms is personalized content. And I have a lot of discussions about that with many people. And a lot of people are kind of scratching behind the ears and saying well, how could we, personalize content for every individual HCP? That's going to be impossible, right? And an example I like to use is when you put the power in the hands of the person consuming the content, everything is personalized. For instance, the internet is a good example. If I go online, I only see what I want to see because that's what I'm looking for, but the rest of the internet is still there. So, it made me, I was thinking about this because of what you just said, right? You open the opportunity for the content consumer, in this case, the HCP, to kind of indicate what they actually need to know, rather than us, rolling out a narrative that we had prepared, regardless of what the recipient actually is looking for. So I don't think this is as much as about creating personalized content. It is more about finding ways to put the content consumer in charge of the dialogue and us being supportive in answering those questions and informational needs.
Right. And also, we don't want to, put our field team out to dry either, even though we want to start simple. I think it's really important to, I think this word is maybe overused, but having interactive content readily at our hands of our MSLs. So say you have maybe a slide that's an overview slide. There should be several buttons that you could go to, double click into, this figure or that figure, take you to this video or take you to this reference that, shows this exact data. Because I think, we got to anticipate a little bit what our HCPs and our customers might ask or might, have a question about. And so I think it's really critical, like I said, start small, but we have all of these tools, all of these links, all of these call outs that, we could easily, without interrupting the flow of the dialogue, get to. Because we also don't like, oh man, let me pull up this PowerPoint. Let me, try to dig up this manuscript and get into this information, because that also just kind of interrupts that scientific storytelling flow that we all aim to have at the highest level, because we only have 15, 20 minutes with these folks. So yeah, we don't want to leave our field teams out to dry. So we got to make sure simple, yet there's a lot of things packaged in this overview that they could easily get to.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I was just thinking, like, there's something I want to share, and I know it might be sounding like a quick infomercial for my agency, but I will take the risk here. I'm exactly on the same line of thought here with you, and in a concept we introduced some years ago is called the facilitated storytelling slide decks. And that is exactly that. Like, the MSL needs support and needs to be able to show anything they need to show based on the conversation they're having, but without this data overload and linear concept of the old traditional slide decks. And that is exactly what it is. So they have actually a conversation, and we built an interface within the deck that is extremely intuitive. So while they're talking and asking the right questions, they can navigate in a split second to the sections that they need. And the feedback we've been having from both of our clients, from the MSLs, and also from the HCPs they are talking with, has been extremely well, because they just have like more organic discussions rather than something that is previously it might have been led a little bit too much by the actual PowerPoint rather than by what the HCP actually needs. So I think this is a really exciting development in general for our industry, that we're starting to understand how we can tackle those challenges better, how we can still support our field teams, and still create content that is extremely effective and impactful.
I couldn't agree more. That's something I'm very curious to see. My mind was spinning about leveraging AI to maybe understand where a HCP might have a question or might want to go off the path, and then boom, we'll have the information readily at our hands based off of that. So yeah, I think this is something really great that you guys are doing, and I think more of us as medical affairs professionals need to learn from.
Yeah, thank you. Also, funnily enough, not so long ago, I recorded another episode that should be online once this one is online. It is with Michael Moore, who has been an MSL for a very long time, and I'm basically asking him these questions, and he has a very strong view on like how important it is to ask questions in those conversations, and how you then can craft your story to resonate better. And again, of course, we're medical affairs; we're not convincing or persuading or selling. But of course, like if you want someone to remember something, then it needs to be as relatable as possible. And I really liked how he spoke about that. So for anyone that was listening and interested in that topic, maybe find the episode in our channel and have a listen. So Matt, like maybe pivoting a little bit to another topic. If anyone would ask you for some recommendations, like what would be your top recommendations for other MedComms professionals to modernize their approach? What 3 things would you tell them?
I would say first and foremost, and I kind of already spoke about this, but you got to really understand your audience. That is really important. Whenever you're putting pen to paper, you want to develop some new innovative content or communications. You got to know your audience through and through. You got to know your therapeutic area, but you also got to know what your audience wants to see. So conduct surveys, talk to KOLs in the field. That will really set you apart and show your really broad understanding, not only to yourself, but also to the senior leaders around you. So that's really critical. I would also say, we kind of talked about this a little bit, but there are always going to be segments or perhaps different personas within your therapeutic area. So maybe there's some folks that really want to see more digital communications. They want to see videos, they want to see animations, but then there's others that want to see very dense PowerPoint slides. You got to know your audience, and you could tailor all your content based off of these personas. So knowing those will set you even further apart. And then what I also like to say is, you shouldn't only be talking to people within medical affairs. You need to branch out, collaborate, talk to your commercial colleagues, talk to your patient centricity teams, really broaden your horizon, broaden your Rolodex there so that you could get the full picture within your therapeutic area. You're not going to be able to develop the best content or the best communications unless you have that full picture. So know your audience, maybe segment and understand the personas more, but then also step out of med affairs, talk to other people within your organization. And then by doing that, your content and your communications will be hitting home. I guarantee it.
I really, really love that last point that you just made. It's kind of the outward facing perspective, right? And being out there in the world. And I think it's so important, Matt. I'm so happy that you brought this one up. I'm not even always realizing it myself, but if you stay, like, we all tend to work in a little bubble, right? We're in the company, we are focusing typically on one product, and we know everything about it, and 40 to 60 hours a week, it's all about that, right? And for the outside world, the picture looks quite different. And I think it's so interesting to communicate with those people and learn from that. You're right. Like, if you just stay internally focused, not just internally, but also within internally medical affairs and other functions, you're completely right. I love that recommendation. Thank you for sharing that. That's a very good insight. Now, maybe as a closing question here, Matt, what is something like an ambition when it comes to MedComms, like something that you would like to do, to try to test, to pilot, or something you're simply looking forward to in medical communications?
So I think it starts and begins with AI. I think we as a medical affairs community, there's a lot of things that we do that are maybe mundane that AI could pick up, but there's also, there's so much promise out there to get the right content in the right channel, the right format to our customers by taking on the full power of AI. I have several conversations about this with my colleagues day in and day out. We create central content left and right, but we also do have several segments out there that maybe our regions and our affiliates maybe localize our content at their end to fit the needs of their customers. But why can't AI? Let's just say we have this persona. We feed it into whatever platform, and by feeding that in, it takes whatever content we just developed, maybe it's one big slide deck, it takes the key points and then boom, packages it into a specific slide deck for this persona because AI can do wonders. So there's just so many things, not only with the content, but also with our communications. There's a certain event coming up Why can't we have AI develop some easy communications that we can compliantly send out to inform our customers? This is just the omni-channel customer engagement approach. There's so much that I feel that we can learn and leverage by using AI. And I really think our industry 2 years from now, maybe even a year from now, there will be several new innovations that each company will be copying and trying to use, because there's going to be some trailblazers out there that are testing the norm. They're fighting against, what's always been done. And it's because of that we'll be able to get better care ultimately to our patients. So I want to continue to try to use AI, try to, combat what's been done before, because by doing that, we will reach new horizons.
Exciting. Very exciting. And I would love to hear when, you make progress in that area, and maybe you can share some of your insights.
Absolutely.
Matt, thanks so much for being here on the Transforming Medical Communications podcast today. It was really exciting to have you here, and thanks so much for sharing all your insights with our listeners. It is really appreciated.
Absolutely, Wesley. This was a pleasure. Thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to our next conversation.
Transforming Medical Communications is brought to you by MedComms Experts. To find out more about MedComms Experts and how we create some of the most cutting-edge medical communications programs anywhere in the world, visit www.medcoms-experts.com. And then make sure to search for Transforming Medical Communications in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at MedComms Experts, thanks for listening.